be home. It feels so good every single time. When we're, going between DC and coming back to New York, coming back here always feels like coming back in that desert and you're going back to the oasis and you're taking that drink of water and then you're going back out to fight and making sure that we're getting the right things passed and the right issues advanced in this country. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so thankful to be here. I'm so thankful to be in your presence, everyone here's presence today, because this right here, the people that are organized in this room, each and every single one of you individually organized and put together, is what is going to change the United States of America. And that is just one of the main things that I want to share with each and every one of you all today, is that this is not about one person getting one seat in DC. This is about each and every single one of us participating in a movement, however we are called, to change this country. And in some ways, people say that we're trying to change our country into this radical new direction. But in some ways, I feel like we're just trying to come back home. That we're just trying to reassert and renew the values of justice, freedom, liberty, human dignity, humanity, and looking after one another. Because one of the big things that we talked about is that in this moment, and I think it's no secret that a lot of us feel that we have strayed from those values as a government, as an administration, and sometimes just as a culture. And so a lot of what this means to me is hope, and a lot of what this means to me is the idea that we can actually be engaged and excited, not just about politics, but about policy, about culture, about the conversations that we're having. That right there, this right here, this is the work and this is change. And I'm just really excited. I'm really excited about it. I'm feeling really good. Because just a year ago, I have to always remind people, because it seems that when we're on TV or when you're doing this or doing that, or it's a couple weeks ago, being on the cover of Time magazine, it's really surreal. It's really surreal. And it feels awkward and uncomfortable for me to even say that. That cover came out and it felt like when you go to Disney and they do the fake ones, That's really what it felt like to me. It feels, if anyone here has heard of the term imposter syndrome. Has anyone heard? Raise your hand if you've heard of imposter syndrome. Yeah, that's like my life. And it's hard to believe, and it really is what I feel so often every day. It's like, I don't belong here, this magazine cover is fake, I don't know if people are following me around, I'm not that important. And I think it's important to share that, because even in what feels like a totally surreal moment, and what can look like success doesn't always feel like success. It feels just like insanity. And I remember 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, when my college graduation was coming up. Is anyone here a senior? Congratulations! Anyone here first in their family on one or both sides to go to college? That's what I'm talking about. When I say that the change in this country is real, that is exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an entire generation that is changing and creating history in their own family line by being the first to go to college, or being the first to start a business, or being the first to express themselves creatively in a bold and courageous way. And so a year ago, I was working in Union Square. I was bartending. And 10 years ago, I was a senior about to graduate college. Wasn't quite sure about my future. I knew that I wanted to dedicate my life to community. I knew that I wanted to dedicate my life in that immediate term to children and to education and to organizing. And I remember that I I applied, there was kind of like this contest to be your commencement speaker. And I wrote a speech and I sent it in, someone had encouraged me, and I didn't get it. And I remember it was like very, the competition was very heated. And at the very end, it was like me and maybe 2 other people. It was like 3 finalists. And like people were really excited and all of these things, and I didn't get it. And I was sitting there, and the winning speech was about supporting our institutions, and the winning speech was about really like praising the way we have been doing things. And my speech was like the total opposite. And I was like, I think I know why I wasn't picked. And 10 years later, my alma mater is like, talking about coming back to graduation. It's not necessarily for delivering a huge commencement speech or whatever, but it's like, it's funny how these things come full circle, because the short term feels like failure for a very long period of time. And even while I was running just a year ago, I was bartending, I was going out into my community. The very first canvas that I did was out of a Trader Joe's bag. And I had a clipboard, and some friends and some folks organizers that I had worked with had just kind of mocked up a palm card with my face and my name on it, and we started canvassing like a year before the primary election, and we had no idea what we were doing. We had no idea, but we're like, we're gonna try this. We're gonna do this. And as each stage went forward, we learned about it as the step came. And it was the complete opposite of how I was taught that we need to do things. It was the complete opposite of how I was taught how you pursue success or how you pursue any big project. The way that I felt we had to do things was to make sure you knew all the steps in advance. Like, what are you going to do? How are you going to do it? How are you going to pay for it? How are you going to do all this? How are you going to do that? And if you don't know every single step before you start, then don't start. That was kind of the model of how I was taught to do things. And after trying to do things that way for so long and feeling discouraged for so long, I had just kind of tossed up my hands and said, we don't have time to wait right now with where we are as a country. We don't have time to wait for someone to descend from the heavens and give us the entire blueprint that's scoped out from step 0 to step 100. We just need to start. And we'll figure it out on the way, and we'll find our mistakes, and we'll correct them, and we'll iterate on them, and we'll do them better next time. But that is what evolution actually looks like. And you just take that as far as you possibly can. And that real success is not about, it's not about not making a mistake, but it's about acknowledging your mistakes, not doubling down on them, and correcting them, and transitioning out of them. And so that's what we did. And so my first canvas, which Dr. King was a part of, she brought her sons, and a lot of other people in the community came out. And for months, I just took this Trader Joe's bag. It was like a grocery bag for like the first 6 months. And then I graduated to a little like carrito that like, people, like you're going to the laundromat or something. So I went from the Trader Joe's bag to the carrito, and then eventually we'd like rent like a car to go or a zip car or whatever. We were going, across boroughs and things like that. And I think it's just important to revisit those stories because, it's like Beyonce came out with her documentary last night, right? And I'm still itching to watch it, but I did see one clip where one of the things that she talks about is that, like, no one sees what that dirty work looks like. No one sees what that sacrifice looks like. And 99% of it is that. 99% of it feels like, I don't know if this is working. 99% of it feels like you're tired. 99% of it feels like discouragement sometimes. But I always kind of go back and think about this other quote from former President Theodore Roosevelt, where he talks about the man in the arena, and that it is not the critic who counts. It's not the person who's sitting in the audience pointing at the mistakes that you're making. It is the person in the arena whose face is marred with dirt and sweat and blood who decides to valiantly try again and again. And I think that there is no stronger ethos from our communities when we're first generation, when we're women, when we're people of color, when we're immigrants, that it's not about executing because we've been groomed from the time we were born about the right way to do everything. It's that we are just relentless. And we learn that from our parents, and we learn that from our families, and we learn that from so many different people. You know, I grew up with family. Some of whom were, you know, they're on both sides of that blue line. I have family that served in the NYPD. I have family that were detectives. I have family that were caught in the criminal justice system. But all of that is part of our entire city story, our entire family story. And you learn what that resilience looks like, whether it's being the first in your family to do something, or whether it's getting up and rehabilitating yourself after you've been locked up in a system. All of that is what persistence and resilience and a commitment to self-improvement looks like. And I'm just excited to kind of sit down and pursue this conversation with you all. But that grounding ethos is the core behind all of the policies that we advance. Because we're in a very critical time, I think, as a society and as a country. Forget the negative parts, you know? Forget the Mueller report, forget all of that. That is a critical tipping point, absolutely. But here I want to talk a little bit about our positive tipping points. Because one is that I think that one of the things that we're reckoning with right now is that with the evolution of technology and with the evolution in our systems and our elevation and our collective consciousness as a culture, is that we are realizing that we are kind of outgrowing a zero-sum society. Because of the amount of technology that we have, because of the way that we're doing things, what happens when some things are not scarce anymore? What happens when we actually do have the technological capacities to feed every single person in the world? And I think these are the challenging questions that we are dealing with right now as a society, because we do have the capacity to clothe every child and feed every hungry person, but we do not have the systems and the distribution of resource that is prepared for that advancement in our technology. I think those are some of the core questions that we have. You know, especially when we have conversations about immigration, and people say, well, how are we going to fit all of these people? We don't have, like, what is going to happen? It's this idea that there is not enough, when we aren't matching that to the reality that there's a labor shortage in this country. There aren't enough people to fill jobs in critical industries, whether it's high skill, whether it's meat packing, whether it's construction, whether it's new technology. There are vacancies. But we're so tied to this idea of zero sum. We're so tied to this idea that there is not enough. But due to our evolution as a society, we're in certain specific areas that we are starting to depart from that reality. And so those are the questions that I think we're going to have to wrestle with. Those are the questions that we're going to have to answer for our generation and generations to come. And that, at its core, is why we believe that we need to evolve our idea of what human rights look like. That is why I believe healthcare is a right, education is a right, that we have access to clean water is a right, that these are part of a second economic bill of rights. And that is not an idea that I came up with. That is an idea that was established by the President of the United States in the 1940s with President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Franklin Delano Roosevelt presented the second economic bill of rights, which include a right to a job, a right to dignified retirement, a right to health care, and these were things that we started to recognize were possible 80 years ago. And so really what I think we're charged with doing is challenging the limitations of our past thinking and realize and try to advance what a good and just and innovative America looks like for the 21st and 22nd centuries. So I just kind of want to leave you with that, and I'm excited for us to come out and have this conversation. So thank you all very, very much.